We've all been there. We're aware and feeling slightly awkward that somebody's taking the discussion off topic, they're derailing the conversation, or they're rambling. But we're all polite. We want to seem engaged and we want to encourage others. We're unsure how to nudge the conversation or meeting back on track. And it can be quite an uncomfortable feeling when you know others in the room are experiencing the same thing. I feel like I can almost smell it now, that feeling when you know somebody is either intentionally or unintentionally dominating the conversation and does need a nudge, but no one is quite doing it. This is the Executive Coach Podcast with me, Maya Goodka, where I help you tune in to work and lives that feel spacious, successful, and aligned with who you truly are. Having worked with hundreds of leaders, I know that when we're properly supported and with great prioritization and planning, we really can have it all with ease. So let's stop the overwork and dive in. The concept of the art of interruption was driven by some coaching work that I did, and I was repeatedly hearing this issue around how to interrupt often more senior colleagues in a way that was both respectful, but really utilized people's time well. And given that time is at such a premium inside organizations and meetings can be a huge drain of time, as well as obviously being really important, I thought it was worth tackling this subject. And we're told that listening is a key skill. And this is why it was coming up as such an issue for my clients on this program, because listening is key. And so how do we get that balance? And how do we square listening as that skill with the practice of having to maybe cut somebody off when they're mid-flow? And it's particularly an issue when the people in question, the people that are perhaps rambling or going off topic, are more senior or they're more dominant characters. There are going to be perfect moments, and some people are particularly good at knowing when to come in. And I started to notice this in all the lockdown Zooms, that some people were just better than others at finding that spot. And we've all been there, and I know I've been there. But I've heard from many clients that they can't quite get that timing right of when they then come in. Obviously, there are so many different ways that we can handle this. And I just wanted to get us even thinking about this, because whether this is in formal meetings or, more informal discussions, this issue comes up everywhere. And so having a few tools up your sleeve or having thought about it, maybe from a different perspective, I think can really help. The fundamental piece of my message is that the art of interruption really begins before the conversation begins. The more that you can frame up front the purpose of the conversation and think through and say out loud, look, this is how much time we have available. This is what we need to cover. And critically, if you can, in that setup, say something along the lines of, look, if we are running out over time or we're drifting off topic, if you don't mind, I will move this conversation, or I might need to interrupt. Apologies in advance. The more permission you've obtained to do that up front, the less the blow is going to feel, or you're going to lessen the blow if you then have to do that further on. Think of yourself as setting the conversation up for success, particularly when you know that there are going to be some dominant characters who risk derailing the process. And as coaches, we refer to this setup work as contracting. And to be honest, either facilitating or coaching, a big part of my job is managing that dynamic. And I've become increasingly aware, having done a lot of facilitation, a lot of coaching, that if I've noticed that there are some dominant characters, if I've heard that they might go on, I'm really aware that I need to upfront address that and give myself a set of levers. In my early days, when I was very green behind the ears, I remember sitting there thinking, gosh, this person's really going on here. And I know that everybody is feeling uncomfortable. And I didn't quite feel I'd set things up to be able to interrupt in the way that I now can. And I now have a lot of confidence in the way that I can do that in these settings. And I say up front, to serve the aims of the group as a whole, I request that permission if I sense we're getting off track. And in the moment, apologies if that seems a bit clunky or blunt, but it's really in service of making the best of our time together. So I do tend to set that up as part of my job. But as I've done that more in those sort of facilitated or coached group sessions, I also now do like to do that in meetings as well, and generally find that it only serves to help focus everybody's minds on what we need to cover. So for me, it's really saved a lot of second guessing. It frees me up from that uncomfortable feeling in the moment so I can be present in the meeting or the session. And when I do set it up like that, I've never had anyone disagree to say that interruption is not necessary. So, you're also getting people's buy-in that is going to be something. Another way of thinking about this is also, again, let's say you're at a certain stage in the meeting and you've done your setup, and now perhaps you want to invite input, which is obviously can be a really important part of a meeting. And when you do that, you're slightly nervous that you're also opening yourself and the meeting up to a lot of random comments and potentially getting blown, off track. So again, you have an opportunity here to frame things up front and say, look, request punchy responses, to say to people, look, I'm just going to give you opportunity to have, a minute or two. And if you don't mind, just so that everyone gets a chance and it's fair that everybody gets a chance to input here, I will let you know, once that couple of minutes is up and we need to move on. If they then are still waffling despite having this framing and warning up front, then, at least they know that they are likely to be interrupted and it doesn't feel like, a bit of a shock. So that's my second approach. So you've got some setup stuff, you've got some stuff for once you're in a meeting and you want to hear from others, but you don't want it to blow up the meeting. And then the third one, of course, is you've done all of this and yet you still find yourself in that position where you do need to actually interrupt. So the first thing is to prepare people by gesturing. So assuming that you can see people, so you're either on a video call or you're in person, then, prepare people with some gesturing. So just like, whatever works for you. It could be a bit of a hand in the air, it could be a bit of a nodding, anything to show that you are probably going to move the conversation on shortly. This gives them an opportunity to come to a natural close. Now, of course, the difficulty is that sometimes these individuals might be a little bit oblivious to such signals, or you may not feel that you have that right in the hierarchy to do that because that's not your position in it around the table. So if you still need to cut in, here's some suggested ideas. Now, this might not resonate with you. You might think, actually, this is how I would say it. Brilliant. If you can start to come up with some language that you feel comfortable with, that's what we're going for. So here's a marker in the sand to get you thinking is, this is so interesting. I can see that there's more to delve into here, conscious of time. So we might need to come back to this separately to explore it further. I suggest for now, we take that and we move on to X and Y. So on one hand, I feel like I'm spelling all of this out here. I just wanted to, sometimes it's really useful to hear somebody else saying it, and then you can choose how you may make your own response. So that's 3 steps. You've got some framing up front, some framing in the middle when you're inviting responses, and then you've got the final action of interrupting in that meeting. The other one to say is if you happen to be on an audio call, which I know I was talking to some coaches recently, is like, it's a real novelty now, isn't it? When you do a meeting just by phone, we're so used to having the video technology accompanying it. But let's say you are doing that, because I personally really do like audio calls still. Then you've got an opportunity to say, look, apologies again if I seem like I'm jumping in or interrupting you because I can't see you. I might, sort of talk over you here or there. So apologies in advance. With audio, it's that little bit harder. So again, thinking about the communication medium and then qualifying and setting up some criteria for what that might mean in terms of the dialogue. The other technology, of course, is in video conferencing and utilizing that stuff. So, of course, being, setting up for people to use all of the signaling devices, putting hand up and chat functions and stuff like that. All of these can be really good aids for inviting opinion and discussion as you go along. Maybe that's a subject for another podcast session, because these technologies, sometimes people feel like they're never equivalent or better than in person, but actually they do have some really good advantages that in some instances make them superior to in-person brainstorming and dialoguing as well. But maybe more about that another time. I hope that has been a useful way of thinking about interruption and the art of interruption. I hope you might have some examples of where you can try this out. Up front, I gave you a couple of the lines of feedback. So people were talking about when they're facilitating group sessions, one-to-one meetings, and very much the boardroom. The boardroom, this stuff needs to happen. Just because it's the C-suite and boardroom does not mean that everybody there has mastered the art of pithy communication. Sometimes the best use of time is not one where there are no interruptions. It's much better to get more out of the session, and everybody will benefit from you having good ways of interrupting. So I'm going to leave it there. I hope you find that helpful, and I look forward to connecting with you next time. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.